Good evening, and welcome to week 5 of 10 questions. If not now, when? I'm Vic Marks, and though I host each week and lead the student course, this begins with a shout out to Anne-Marie Burke, Executive Director of Strategic Communications for the School of the Arts and Architecture. Anne-Marie Burke is my collaborator, which means that these Monday evening gatherings are the realization of our shared commitment to bringing extraordinary makers and thinkers together, you all among them, to tangle with and also untangle critical questions in our lives. It's my pleasure and joy to work with Anne-Marie on 10 questions, where 1 + 1 always equals 3, or 4, or 5. I just wanted to make sure you knew that though you don't see Anne-Marie, she's very much a part of each of our Monday evenings and our production team. The students who make up the 10 questions class are also working on collaborative projects each week, where we're hoping they'll discover an ethic of care and a space in which to take risks. My hope as their instructor is that they will experience the ability to achieve something with someone that they could never have done themselves. And that shared discovery becomes an enduring, valued outcome of their collective work. While we're thinking about collaboration, could we consider that we are all collaborating to create community across our different experiences, even right here in 10 questions? I'm wondering where else you collaborate, create in community with others, where resources are shared and pooled, or where collective outcomes are more important than your individual recognition. Let's start right there. Please share in the chat. Where else do you collaborate besides by joining us at 10 questions? I'm reading the chat. Yes, 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 yes. Thank you for taking us there into all those places where the collective outcome is more important than you by yourself, because these are important places in which we push against that idea that our individuality is the most important thing. This evening's question is, how do we heal? And why this question now? Well, just look at us. You, me, your friends, your families. We have a pandemic in which loved ones have been lost, a time in which many have lived in isolation and fear, exasperated by economic, social, political, and environmental precarity, a time in which fellow community members' skin color or immigrant status continues to heighten risk of discrimination and harm, where climate change is barreling towards an irreparable existential crisis, where social networking platforms are more interested in profit than in your well-being, and where the notion of truth is a political and movable feast, where you students and all of us are still supposed to succeed despite all these things. Well, how are you doing? No, really, how are you doing? We want to know. And if you're comfortable doing so, please take another moment in the chat to let us know how you're doing. I am reading the chat. I thank you for sharing this with us. The question, please do keep sharing. The question, how do we heal, could suggest the kind of healing or getting better that happens as a result of seeking medical attention. When I go to the doctor, I'm hoping that I will get medication to get cured or that something wrong will get fixed. To me, that notion of healing is contingent on the idea that there is something physiologically broken or in need of repair. But we are also more than a body, meaning our wellness in a broad sense goes beyond our organs and muscles and bones to something that can't always be seen and measured. I don't know what to call it. Spirit, psyche, state of mind. Different belief systems have different names for the part of us that moves beyond matter. And somehow, how we heal is caught up in what we believe heals us. These days, I'm frequently alerted to experiences of harm and of generational trauma. Racism causes harm and generational trauma, as do heterosexism, misogyny, ableism, ageism, and religious intolerance. How do we heal ourselves and each other from the harm we may not even realize we're taking part in? From harm inflicted by systemic isms, often well beyond our conscious reach. We are woven into the network of harm, both consciously and in ways beyond our immediate understanding. Here's a thought. What if ensuring your wellness is the very thing that makes me well? How do we heal ourselves and each other? And doesn't that come back to collaboration, ensuring that our individual healing is tied to one another? Throughout this evening, I encourage you all to lift each other up by sharing your support in the chat as we go. This evening will include a 10-minute presentation from our 3 guests who will each offer a way of considering how we heal. This will be followed by a special contribution from students at Torres East LA Performing Arts Magnet who have responded to this evening's question. And we'll follow this with a conversation amongst our guests, and we'll conclude with your questions, which you may submit in the chat or by using the Q&A feature. When we reach the end of our program at or near 8:30 p.m. Pacific time, we will say good evening to you all. Our first guest tonight is Professor Vicki Mays, who returns to 10 Questions, having joined us last year to consider what is kindness. At that time, she made the powerful observation, she might have thought it was small, but it was huge, that being kind is quite different than being nice. Thank you for that, Vicki, and we're looking forward to more tonight. Distinguished Professor Vicki Mays is a clinical psychologist and health policy expert with appointments in UCLA's College of Letters and Sciences, Department of Psychology, and the Fielding School of Public Health. Vicki has worked with individuals who have been incarcerated for murder and with individuals who have been bullied or discriminated against because of their race. In this work, she has experienced the transformative power of kindness. Her research on race-based discrimination examines how discrimination, racism, reduces the life expectancy of Blacks in the United States and has led her to search for ways to utilize this research to develop policy and practice interventions to reduce race-based discrimination. Welcome, Vicki. It is a kindness that you are here with us again.
Thank you very much. This feels very special to be able to be here again. So, and you know, I love being with our students, to be able to talk about healing right now with our students is just a privilege, because as you know, it's something that I've been very concerned about. But what we're going to talk about tonight, at least what I'm going to talk about, is not healing of individuals, but I'm going to talk about healing of a group, of a population. And there are many ways that all of us can help. So I'm going to start with questions. I'm going to be much like Vic has 10 questions. I only have 2 tonight. So let me, just do that. So my first question that I want you to think about is, we know there's been a lot of racial reckoning in the United States, and we haven't had many legal victories. We haven't really been able to have verdicts of accountability. There was also COVID-19, in which Black lives did not matter as much as other lives. You saw how things rolled out very slowly that were specific to the Black community. And then in the midst of all of this, there is the psychological realities of not receiving care and treatment that really damages us. And the question is healing for Black Americans possible? Now, I don't want you to get down, because it is, so just hold on to hope. So it's hope and optimism I want you to hold on to, even though I posed that question. So what my next question is, what is necessary and what is required for healing that addresses those 3 areas of question 1, racial reckoning, COVID-19, and what we're in right now is, and I don't have to even tell you that because I saw your answers. So you, like us, are in the midst of this psychological epidemic where we're all struggling in terms of being distressed, where we're all struggling in terms of, social isolation. Even though we're there on campus, we haven't quite gotten back to our ability to be related human beings. So you're going to hear me talk about social connectedness a little later in this. So Vic really started us off right, because I wanted to make sure to say, what is healing? Healing is not the same as fixing. As we are presenting, you are going to get a sense of an Indigenous perspective, racial and ethnic minority perspective, not the typical Western perspective that you sometimes have in your education. So we come from cultures where healing is not fixing. Healing really is a lot of work. Healing is transformation. It is opportunity. It is opening up. And it's not fixing. So I just wanted to make sure we think about that. But the question that's frightening for me is, who is responsible for ensuring that Black America receives healing so that we can be made whole in this country? Now, some of us were very excited when we had a Black president, but that Black president had so many things to do. He couldn't be as Black as we all wanted him to be, and focusing on, Black America. I mean, the challenge to him was to focus on all of America. So I don't know what the answer to this question is. So that's why, knowing how great the UCLA students are, I'm going to share it with you and ask you to take the journey in terms of helping to make this happen. And is it even possible to heal? The answer is yes. So what does it mean to heal? How do we create healing for Black America? And one of the reasons I do slides, and I'm leaving them, is because there are things that you can go and look at afterwards. And much of this is here for you. There is at the Kellogg Foundation a project called Truth and Transformation. And really say, what is racial healing? It really means that as individuals, you undertake this process of racial healing and you move it along to communities and societies. It's not about you and I, but it's about learning skills to move into those larger communities. And so one has to really do their homework here, because it really is about, we start with the transformation as us to be able to be a we. And the reason that we want you to move this along is because we don't want this to be a movement. Racial healing has to be a movement, or else you will be worn down trying to do it by yourself. What does it mean? It means that you also, in racial healing, that you really investigate history so that it acknowledges what the past wrongs are. Because what you want to know is, what are the truths about people who are not like you? And what is the accountability bar that we should be holding people to? Very interesting thing that you can do is to learn about the history of apologies in the US and understand who's been apologized to and who hasn't. Often people joke about this notion of Black Americans asking about reparations, or when Spike Lee talks about his company, it's 40 acres and a mule. Those were things that were promised that never came about. And so I'm going to give you an example of accountability that is in higher education. What we don't realize is that the greatness of some of our campuses have been at the expense of others. We have very great medical schools in the United States, but what people don't realize is that how some of our medical schools got to be so great is they engaged in a process called night riders, where they would rob Black bodies from graves. And so they would advertise that they had cadavers and that you should come to their medical school because you would get to participate on a person, on a body. They also advertised to slave owners, if they had a sick slave, let us take them off your hands. And those became also subjects upon which individuals practice. This is a very proud picture. This is a university saying, look, if you come here, you will be able to practice on a cadaver. And we've yet to have repatriation. We've yet to have people try and understand the history of who was taken from those graves. This is what I mean about healing. We have to know the truths of the past. There have to be apologies. There has to be the opportunity for people to be connected in humanity, not in ask, but in humanity. When I say, is it possible to heal? Well, yeah, your education, which is what you're getting right now, is that you need to understand historically racism and how it's embedded in the very structures that you have. Big example is the history of standardized testing. Who gets into a university and who doesn't? You know, it isn't about just the schools are poor, but it's about the testing that we do that serves as a barrier to say which school you can go to. So part of what I want you to think about is this collective of racial healing. And that is a movement of developing communities that create opportunities for those movements that I'm talking about. And it's the movements that reduce racism and, you know, all the things that we need in order to heal. What can you do to create psychological well-being in Black America? First thing I would say to you is it's your work is to become anti-racist. And that means working on and unlearning the ways of oppression by privilege. And I want to make sure that people understand that I'm also talking to those of us who are racial and ethnic minorities. We have some privilege sometimes. We may be cisgendered, we may be male, we may be, so there are ways in which we also have work to do as well. Create spaces where all are at the table. Do not talk about inviting people to the table. That's a point of privilege. Because if you begin to think about what are contributions and values, you might find that my ancestor or somebody else's ancestor planted that tree that let you have that table. The table that you have now may have a history and you didn't appreciate it, and appreciate what the contributions are of how you got to be at the table because of the work of others. And in racial healing, what we talk about is space and place to be able to talk about harm and trauma, but we have to find interconnectedness of survival. And here what I'm talking about is we survive in our humanity. We don't survive as individuals. So being able to be connected is very important. And then of course, what it is that you can do to challenge structural racism. And it isn't about tearing things down alone. Sometimes I'll give you a very quick example. I grew up in Chicago. We had all these horrible housing projects, and they thought it was a big contribution. They tore them all down, and then we had people who were homeless. So you have to understand that sometimes it's important to build up before you tear down. And we often are quick to want to tear down. So I'm going to stop there so that, we're within our time, but I invite you to really think about, this issue of what you can do to help us to be able to make this a better place.
Oh, Vicki, thank you for taking us off in the beginning with such a powerful charge and opportunity. I just before we move on, I just want to take a moment to take in some of the things you've said. This is work. This is about transformation. You said to us, it's not any one of us responsible on our own, but we need to be part of a movement, a collective. Maybe we could use that word collaboration again. We need to work with each other. And also appreciating that we need to study our histories and handle difference and conflict by being curious, by seeking out not the ones who are like us, but by learning how to be in a much more diverse community.
Exactly.
Is there something you want to make sure that gets there too?
Yes, let me just comment. In racial healing, that's what's going to happen. It is about preparing ourselves to be able to be a part of a collective, and having that collective or that collaboration then have a movement that's what's going to bring about racial healing. Because we each need others to open our minds and to use the education that we're getting to not take it passively, but to challenge it and ensure that the truths are there. Now, my colleagues I love, but I will tell the students, sometimes you have to ask us to tell you truth, because otherwise we're doing the same thing of teaching you to do well on the GREs or the LSATs or the MCATs. Sometimes you have to shake us and say, but what else should I know? That is for me, the human, not me at the next step.
Thank you so much, Vicki. And I'm also thinking that we have many, many international students here with us in this class. And so there's also, first of all, just learning about American history for one, and then also thinking about taking this thought about how people are marginalized and how we all need to reach out to one another to ensure that, that everyone can stand with dignity and respect. And I think that definitely I'm seeing that, especially for our international students, we hardly know one another, and there's a lot of work to do.
I agree.
Thank you again. So I'm going to introduce our next guest this evening, who is my colleague in the Department of World Arts and Cultures Dance, Professor David Delgado Shorter. Dr. David Delgado Shorter is an award-winning author and filmmaker and curator. His scholarly interests focuses on sexuality, performing geography, research methodologies, particularly ethnography, settler science, and the search for ET, extraterrestrial intelligence. In 2016, David became director of the Archive of Healing, a database of medicinal folklore from around the world. He's been certified as having been attuned to Gokui Kaiden, the highest level of Gendai Reikiho, by Hiroshi Doi Sensei from Ashiya, Japan. Welcome, David.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be in the company of both the organizers, the staff who've made this production possible, and of course the two co-presenters with me. I look forward to hearing the other two presentations. I did want to start out by saying that I'm Zooming to you from Van Nuys, and I'm a professor at UCLA, and both of those are on ancestral Tongva lands. And so I'd just like to start off with that slight land acknowledgement to place us and let us know the sort of space that we're in, that we're sharing knowledge. I'm going to go ahead and show some slides to start us off, and hopefully you can see those just fine. I was raised in the housing projects of a small rural town in southern New Mexico, partly in the home of my great-grandmother, actually, who was a sort of curandera or patira, a type of healer, a woman who helped other women with their birthing processes. She taught me how to pay attention to dreams. She taught me a lot about plants as a child. And I want to see, you're not seeing them? Okay, I will go back to, there we go. And so even though she was helping me understand a lot about plants and dreams and things like that, I ended up going to college where, like a lot of people, I had to realize how to make sense of that childhood education and the ways that I had learned from my great-grandmother, and this way of being a college student that was about positivism and objective-oriented thinking. It ended up actually that I had a chance to start doing work with an indigenous community in Northwest Mexico. And that's really the red box that you're seeing there. They have communities on both on the north side of the border and the south side of the border. I worked inside the southern side of the community. And in that part of the UMA community, people still lived in mud thatched houses. They had electrical outlets, maybe 1 or 2 per house. Very few people had vehicles. And what's really important about this community to keep in mind here is that this community was about 45 minutes to an hour from the nearest health center or clinic. And so it's really important to know that this community, while I'm working with them from the 90s to early 2000s, they still rely on very traditional forms of healing. And I had spent most of my PhD and actually even master's degree research trying to understand different UMA or Yaqui concepts of healing. And the two I'm going to really talk about are Morea, which is the type of power itself, and the sort of people who exercise Morea or have Morea called Moriakame. And I wrote an article about this, and it's inside the World of Indigenous North America. It's a very academic article. It handles sexuality, decolonization, the power of healing. And this talk today is the opposite of that talk. This is one of the first opportunities I've really taken to give you a personal story about that research. See, I had been working with the community for about 15 years, and then I had realized that there weren't that many Moriakame in the community. And then someone told me, we have one now. And he's inside this remote village farther away from the bigger cities, and that I could go meet him. Now, the only thing I had known about these Moriakame is that from a 1934 ethnography is that they tended to demonstrate cross-gendered practices. So men would dress like women or women would dress like men. And I had heard stories that they were primarily not heterosexual and primarily not monogamous. Those are actually particular phrasings that I'm using that you can go to that article and see why I'm phrasing it that way. But I did go to this remote village to meet him, and I wanted to see, who he was. And here comes this man walking out from behind his house wearing a skirt and women's earrings, and his hair's up in a bun. And I was really quite interested to work with this person. I made a formal request in a traditional style in both UMA and Spanish to live with him, to study his healing practices. During that formal address, he and a couple other men said that they saw an older woman appear above my head. And she actually made a request to them that they listen to my request and say yes. And that's what started me out working with a Moriakame. I sometimes say the word apprenticing, but I have to be really cautious here because I am very aware of the complicated resonances with another UCLA affiliated person who apprenticed with Yaqui shaman. And that's why I've never written about this before in my life professionally, and why I've not really spoken about it much. You see, for months I lived in his campo and I saw his day-to-day interactions with people, and I really saw things that defy commonplace understandings of physics and even reality or reason. To state it outright, a Moriakame can heal almost anything. I saw him work with visitors around the world on issues having to do with cancer, HIV, addictions, depression, undiagnosable ailments from the allopathic world. He allowed me to sit into his healing room. He allowed me to talk to some of his patients or clients. I was even allowed to talk to him afterwards about the larger knowledge system, not belief system, but knowledge system that makes such healing possible. And I have to say that I can accentuate some of the aspects of healing as I learned it from him in this talk. First, people have to be ready to be healed. And I do not mean in a sort of like, let me erase that passive voice, be healed. Healing is a process in which a person must do the work, as Vicky says. A healer can help somebody materialize the next steps, but the actual healing is a dynamic initialized internally within the actual person. The healer assists by putting the patient inside a narrative of healing, but the person must not only see themselves as the subject, but perhaps even the author of that narrative. And some people, he told me, were just simply deeply attached to their illness. They, for a variety of reasons, expected him to be like a pill or doctor to fix them. Often people weren't ready to do the work until they had reached the darkest hour, the deepest pain, the most lethargic of fatigues. Taldo felt with them. He literally felt what they felt, and then that helped him move them to a place where they can see their illness in a positive light. And I will say that in other words. Getting sick was a good thing because the sickness invites us to fix an imbalance in our lives. So a person must be ready to see that positivity in what originally may have seemed very negative. It is the thing causing them to feel pain. So illness and imbalance are invitations to, and perhaps pathways toward transformation. Third, the work involved deep emotional excavation and feeling. And I know feelings and expressions get really, you might want to say, degraded inside the social scientific world. But by emotional, I mean weeping, sobbing, yelling, snot dripping from your nose kind of feeling, unmediated by the brain's desire to look composed. So we might not be ready to feel that deeply, but neglecting trauma is causing trauma. So healing spaces, they must feel safe, which is not necessarily how I think of fluorescent lights and marble floors and chairs that keep us separated from the person who went to the hospital with us or stopping us from laying down. That's what we see in doctors' offices in the United States. I saw in various cases the importance of the healer narrativizing, storying, essentially helping people understand why bad things happen in the world, using sometimes religious concepts or stories, the story of science, which helps people feel like they're in power or in control. I saw the importance of ceremony, performance, ritual. These help materialize the ephemeral aspects of human suffering. So to diagnose the causes of our illnesses, I saw Taldo create a space with touch, voice. He would align his breathing with them. He would ask them questions about how they're dreaming, about their sex life, about how their relationships are with plants and animals. And I can tell you, my UCLA doctor has never asked me any of those things. So which brings me to my last understanding I want to share. Healing, as I saw it in that mud-thatched house, it has no business model. I saw Taldo accept bracelets, tortillas. Here was this very powerful person and he was barely scraping by. When he had extra money, he would help foster kids that were abandoned or domestic abuse survivors. Unlike the current pharmaceutically driven system in the United States, Taldo didn't sell people anything. He never told them they had to come back. He seemed actually like he wasn't interested in just treating their symptoms. His job, as he saw it, was just to have them leave better than when they came. And payment was what they felt like they could afford. One day, Taldo came to me and he said, okay, I'm done. You should pack up and leave. That was pretty uncomfortable. He said, get all your stuff in your car. There was no more that I can do on you. And I said, well, I think you meant for me. And he said, no, you were here just like the others to continue healing. he was demonstrating something to me that he taught me before, which is that people who work with energy have to be really clear about boundary maintenance. And he was done with me. He then performed this logic-defying ceremony that I can't really go into quickly. And as I was packing, he started telling me things that I had never told him. And he told me about my own child sexual abuse that happened for years when I was very young. He talked about the things that my grandmother taught me. He told me my grandmother stored it in me so that it would come out later in time, and that time was now, after he worked with me. He told me that I'd pushed it all away to be a scholar and that it was time to start living the life that I was just studying. I immediately heard the voice, of course, of all my mentors and professors saying, don't go native. Oh my God, don't go Carlos Castaneda. I came back to my job as a professor, and then I decided I wanted to take a sabbatical to study Reiki. No one at the university, I don't think, knew I was on this path, but I then went in to start moving healing and meditation classes into my course requirements to teach 4 courses a year. And then out of the blue, I got a phone call to ask if I could be the director of the Archive of Healing. After the work with Taldo, I started to find a long sought happiness, that my professional life was less like a closet where I hid my childhood or my grandmother's lessons. Taldo had put me in the position of being an author of my own story about healing, though I had long suspected that the academic world was kind of making me feel sick. So I'm perhaps not healed, but at the very least, I have a better sense of how we heal. Healed actually is a dangerous goal or state of being. I much prefer the gerund healing. And I wish you the best with yours and your role in other people's healing journeys as well.
Well, thank you, David. Thank you for sharing that story with us. I mean, it's a really thick story and there's so much to consider there, including and especially that you thought you were there to learn how to heal. And in fact, it took you that time to realize you were there to heal. And that wasn't necessarily a contradiction, that somehow, as you were saying, right, that you needed to do the work to heal yourself. And he, I guess, or they, the Murakami, saw that you had at least made that first step into that work.
Yeah, he identifies as he, his gender is he. He actually said, in response to that, I said, oh, you know, you're saying that becoming a professor was a mistake. And he said, no, just the opposite. You haven't learned yet. It's the same story. Like, it wasn't that I chose wrong. It's that it was always meant to be a type of certification that enabled me to speak across different audiences rather than call myself one thing and hide another. So it was really about coming of age, you might want to say, and that I think he was telling me that people's healing journeys, sometimes they're even unconscious of.
Yeah, and sometimes we are just exactly where we need to be. We just need to change how we think about it. Thank you so much, David. I'm going to make a shift now because I want to introduce our third and final guest this evening, who is Dr. Diane White-Clayton. Affectionately known as Dr. D, Dr. White-Clayton is a classically trained soprano, pianist, conductor, and composer. A member of the faculty of the UCLA Herb Alpert School of Music, Dr. D is also the artistic director of the Albert McNeil Jubilee Singers and the founding director of the musically diverse BIFAX, hope I got that right, ensemble. She travels extensively throughout the United States and abroad as a performer, conductor, and clinician. With a mixture of gospel, classical, and jazz, her unique sound reaches the heart and heals the soul. Welcome, Dr. D.
Thank you, Vicki. Vic, what a privilege and an honor it is to be here. I'm going to start with one way that I heal, and that is to sing to God. What shall I do What step should I take? What move should I make? Oh Lord, what shall I do? I'm going to wait for an answer from you. I have nothing to lose. Oh Lord, I'm going to wait. Yes. I know you come through with a blessing for me. Please, Lord, set my soul free. Oh Lord, I know you come through. I can't live without your help. I am weak all by myself. Lord, please give me the strength I need so I can possess eternal peace. I need your peace, Lord. Need your peace. Tell me, what shall I do? That's what I found myself asking in the midst of all of the craziness last year, when we were at the worst of the turmoil, or maybe the best of the turmoil. When I was seeing things that seemed like they were old footage from 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years prior. When I was afraid for the men in my family. When I was perplexed by the people who shared my same faith and denied everything that was right in front of our eyes. I was like, God, where are you? Where are you? But to be honest, it took a minute for me to get there. I think one of the greatest ways that I was healed, and be clear, every day I need to be healed. But one of the moments that I found healing was when I stopped pretending that everything was great. Sometimes as Christians, we get taught this notion, depending on the denomination you're in and what era you grew up in. Sometimes you're made to believe that everything is perfect as a Christian. Hallelujah. Amen. Praise the Lord. And you're made to feel that if you have questions, or maybe not made to feel, you just feel it. If you have questions and you want to question God, or you're mad at God, that's terrible. But I learned, wait, what Bible are you reading? Everybody asks questions if you're going by the Bible. Jesus on the cross was like, Father, why hast thou forsaken me? Moses, Abraham, Mary, Deborah, so many people asked questions. You can't get answers unless you ask questions. So I realized I had to just get real and just pull off all of the masks and say, God, why? It's been so long that we've struggled. Why? It's been, the pain is so deep, I can't talk. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. There's a knee on my neck and a knee on the neck of so many chocolate people and so many vanilla people who feel this pain, and we're just tired. So how do we heal? We start off by being real. I meet a lot of people that have issues with God. They're just like, well, I don't understand. And I always ask, well, have you ever asked? That doesn't mean you're gonna get a perfect answer and everything's gonna be all of a sudden hunky-dory. But I figure if I have a problem with somebody, I'll do better at asking them directly. This song that was written by a friend of mine named Reverend Quincy Fielding Jr. It was written a long time ago, and it helps me when I'm in those weird, crazy, funky places. Like, God, just help me. Just help. And you know what else helps me a lot is just this, singing. Singing our pain, something that Black people have done in this country since we arrived. Singing our pain. This is my story. This is my song. Praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story. Oh, this is my song. Praising my Savior all the day long. I sing because I'm happy. Sometimes I sing because I'm sad. Singing feeds the soul. It frees your spirit. And one of the most difficult things that has happened for people who find themselves in choirs and in places where they make music together during COVID when we couldn't, it was horrific. So I want you to just sing with me. Just sing with me just a second. You're gonna say, lean on me when you're not strong. Now let me just help you for a second. Now one thing about the African American sacred tradition, church tradition, if you don't know the song, you just kind of adding, okay? So I don't care if your roommates are around, you just have to say, give me a second. Dr. C.T. said I had to sing right now, okay? So you're gonna say, lean on me when you're not strong. I'll be your friend. You clap if you want. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. It's community. That's how we do this thing. We are not islands. We're never made to be alone. One of the greatest tragedies, there are so many, of slavery was isolation, was separating, pulling apart families. And this happened to so many people groups across the span of humanity. I need to tell you tonight, and I was feeling those comments. Thanks, Vic, for asking people to say how they're feeling. Sometimes you just feel so alone. You can feel so alone in a crowd, in the midst of your friends, so alone. But you're not alone. Don't ever believe that lie. You're never alone. Come on, sing with me. Oh, lean on me, yeah, when you're not strong. And I'll be your friend. I know you're my friend too. I'll help you carry on. Oh, it won't be long. Yes, I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Oh, lean on. Lean on. Lean on. In order to lean, you take some of the weight off of your own self. There's a song that says, I need you, you need me. We're all a part of God's body. Stand with me, agree with me. We're all a part of God's body. It is that every need be supplied. You are important to me. I need you to survive. You are important to me. We need each other to survive and thrive. God bless you.
Oh, Dr. D, that was amazing. I feel like if I speak to you now, I should sing my response.
Yes, sing it, big. Come on, sing it, girl. Yes.
Well, I was singing a moment ago.
Thank you.
It just what part of what your presentation reminds me of is that this sort of notion of like everyday and real life, that's a good one. It's a good thing, we do that. But there's a place where you go and where we all go. That's not that place, that it's happening in the music. For me, it's happening in the dancing.
Yeah.
It is a place where we become both familiar to ourselves, but also unfamiliar, we go someplace else.
Yes. Well, you know what I think it is? I think it's in us, but we suppress it so much because of our society. Sometimes we suppress it because of age. That's why I love being around little kids. They just uninhibited. The other day, I was in a parking lot and just finishing getting groceries. And I was looking at the cart and I wanted to put it back, and I said, I really want to ride on this cart, but I know people will think I'm crazy. I was like, you know what, forget it. I'm tired of that. And I got on the cart and I just wheeled it like I was 10 years old and I had the most fun time. So I think just what you're saying, Vic, it's like we have to release the artist inside of us. We have to release the singer. We have to release the dancer. We have to release that, all of that. And that helps us to become whole. And when we have that taken away from us, it really is oppressive. It really is. So you can sing your way to health. You can dance your way to health.
Thank you so much for that. I feel thrilled. I feel delighted. I feel the ecstasy of that. And I think you're right. It comes from like living life artfully, like jumping into those places.
Please. And I must say, do not ever discount or do not ever categorize yourself as I'm a singer, I'm not a singer, I'm a dancer, I'm not a dancer. You don't have to be doing it professionally. I'm just talking about our God-given call to exercise our bodies to be free. And that is the voice. The voice is the only instrument that is inside you. You don't have to pack it up or anything. Take it, sing. I promise you, you will find relief. You will find release. You can sing joy into your spirit. You can dance your way out of oppression.
Yeah, I hear that, that it's a practice of liberation. Thank you so much, Dr. D. I'm going to make a move here. Before we shift into a conversation amongst our guests, as mentioned earlier, we are again gifted with the opportunity to share a project coordinated by Kevin Kane, Director of UCLA's Visual and Performing Arts Education Program. Kevin is dedicated to arts-based work throughout Los Angeles, using the arts to bring students, families, and communities together. I'm delighted to welcome Kevin Kane.
Thank you, Vic, and hello, everyone. And wow, I'm really excited and awed to follow Dr. D. Once again, it's my pleasure to represent VAPA with you all tonight, and my great honor to introduce everyone to another very special school community, the Torres East LA Performing Arts Magnet, fondly referred to as ILAPA often. Located deep in the heart of East LA, beyond downtown, situated between the 10, the 60, and the 710 freeways. In keeping with tonight's conversation and reiterating some of the ideas of our esteemed panelists, tonight's creative offering are from high schoolers, and it's their response to how music and poetry could be a tool for healing. So I think an amazing segue from what we just witnessed and experienced. It's an important moment for these students, and I must say an extra special honor to follow the uplifting and true musical message that you just offered, Dr. D. According to Torres Ulapa principal Carolyn McKnight, the school-wide community of Ilapa has experienced a disproportionate amount of loss and grief throughout the pandemic. And gathering as a community for support and inspiration was, unfortunately impossible. And of course, learning the arts, practicing and performing, that was entirely remote for these students. No one got off easy, I'm certain of that, but perhaps no art form was as difficult to teach on the Zoom platform as instrumental or choral music. Just keeping the students signed in, getting them signed in, cameras on, being heard, hearing each other, making music on key, in tempo, all of those things proved to be a daily plight for music educators. And without music and poetry as a creative outlet, many Ilapa students shared that they lost an immediate and important connection to each other. So over a year and a half of their high school years without a crucial outlet to help them process and express their fears and worries, as well as their extraordinary perseverance and community spirit. Principal McKnight shared with me in email. So this is a quote I'm going to read. "The truth is our school community and our student body have always faced more loss and socioeconomic challenges than most other LAUSD schools. The resilience of our students has always been one of their greatest strengths and one of the things I'm most proud of about this community of learners. Our music program has traditionally been a lifeline for our students and a primary way for them to connect and share. Finally, hearing their voices and having their songs sung live once again is bringing joy and hope to the entire campus." End quote. Thank you, Carolyn. And so together, again, the Torres Ilapa students are singing, moving from isolated solo a cappella voices to the full choir. Mandatory mask wearing may be slightly muffling their sound, but it's not drowning them out. Their voices and harmonies are once again reverberating across their campus and now across the city to us. It's my pleasure to introduce the Torres Ilapa Bella Voce and Upscale Show Choirs. Some of those singers are with us here tonight in the webinar. Congratulations, singers. It was such a pleasure working with you on this project and spending time on your campus. Also, enormous gratitude to two outstanding arts educators from the school. Music teacher, Melissa Rios, I saw you in the room tonight. Tech theater teacher, Mr. Daniel Guzman, who I also think is with us, along with Principal McKnight. Without you all, obviously tonight's partnership with 10 Questions would not have been possible. And finally, a big thank you to VAPA Program Assistant Tigran Narcissian for once again helping me to shoot and edit this work. Your work is beautiful. Thank you so much, Tigran. And so without further delay, let's play Ilapa's video.
Life is tough when you're stuck within your thoughts, within your mind, within your tiny room, feeling like a pricked up wall. Isolation can eat away at you and leave you cold and discarded. You may feel down, but please don't feel lost. Don't feel lost. Now it's time to cut through the weeds and sow hope and glee. Now it's time to feel joy from within and without. Now it's time to see just how beautiful you are inside. No longer the fear, the tears that you hide. know that it's safe to look inside and out. We all heal in our own way, whether it be through meditation, dance, therapy, writing, talking, creating, acting. And I know that my heart heals through music.
Have you ever felt like nobody was there? Have you ever felt forgotten in the middle of nowhere? Have you ever felt like you could disappear? Like you could fall and no one would hear? And oh, someone will come running, and I know, to take you home. Even when the dark comes crashing through, when you need a friend to carry you, and when you're broken on the ground, you will be found. So let the sun come streaming in, 'cause you'll reach up and you'll rise again. Lift your head and look around, you will be found. You will be found. You will be found. You will be out of the shadows, the morning is breaking, and all is new, all is new. Staring at the empty, and suddenly I see that all is new, all is new. You are not alone, 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 you are not alone. Even when the dark comes crashing through, when you need a friend to carry you, and when you're broken on the ground, you will be found. 'Cause you'll reach up and you'll rise again, if you only look around. You will be found. You will be found. You will be found. You will be
Thank you to Kevin and all the folks, and especially the singers at the Torres East LA Performing Arts Magnet. That was just beautiful. And if you are so moved, and if you've been found or about to be, please let the folks from Torres East LA Performing Arts Magnet know you heard them. Fill that chat. And now here we are. I'm sure the chat is going to continue to fill up. Here we are back together, or initially together. What do you think? Pretty exciting, right?
Beautiful. Oh, those kids were so great. That was so inspiring. Just beautiful.
Wonderful, just so uplifting.
Yes.
They could be UCLA students.
Yeah, please do, and join
Yes.
my ensemble when you come. I direct the
Yes,
African
let's
American
make
Youth
it a
Ensemble.
pitch in now for them to want to come to us.
Join my choir, yes.
Hmm. So what is it about singing, maybe in particular, and I particularly want to open this up to Vicky and David too. Like, what is it about singing that perhaps sets up the liberation or that process of healing? What's cooking there?
Something I thought really great was that when Dr. D was talking a little bit in response to your question, Vic, someone wrote the word flow. And I will say that studying Reiki, interviewing mediums, psychics, like just, there's something about being so present and not critiquing yourself and not judging yourself and letting the music move through you, that in some ways embodies your lack of resistance to who you are, to what you can be, to be fully present. I think a lot of people, I think Dr. D said it when she answered your question, she said, stop calling yourself, I'm not a singer. And when she said that, I said, oh, I say that all the time. I'm constantly saying, oh, I can't do that, I'm not an artist. Well, that's a type of self-policing that I'm just reiterating what someone else taught me.
Exactly.
And I digested, and now I'm spewing it out when I don't even want to believe it. And singing gets you out of that, I think. And that's why it's so powerful.
And well, I mean, it's cathartic because first of all, we're deep breathing. So many times we feel better when we're singing for various reasons, but on a practical level, you can't sing without breathing, and you are singing you're singing a note, right? So it's like, it's the same as deep breathing, except now you add what happens in music, and music is vibration, and it's breaking up things spiritually that are kind of locked in. So just really powerful. Vicky.
Yeah, and singing also is very soothing in terms of your brain. And sometimes we don't realize it, is that the people who are some of the greatest healers can actually, with their chanting, with their singing, actually put us in a trance. And part of even when you're chanting, you put yourself in a place where the brain is allowed to get you to a very restful state. It really causes you to, from a physiological standpoint, for the brain to be able to get some rest, for it to be able to be in a joyful place. So, so singing is something that is just wonderful. See, I don't have the problem, David, that you have. My friends try and censor me. I'll sing in a minute and know I can't carry a tune 2 places, but it's what it helps me to feel like. And don't let it be a bad day. It's like I'm gonna sing it out.
And I think that's, I know we're talking a lot about music today, but I'm thinking that it's so much a part of dancing, and that I think so many liberation movements, including Black Lives Matter right now, that part of the action is to say, my body will not be made still. I will be moved, and I will dance in spite of, and to express power and agency in this world. So, I feel like it ties back into right where you started us off, Vicki, with thinking about how do we heal? And part of the collaboration and the movement is doing these things together.
It's very interesting because when people were out and we were all just very worried about COVID, it is interesting because the research data that was collected said that for Black Americans, their level of depression was higher. And during the time after George Floyd, where people took to the streets, there was a hopefulness that lifted for just a short amount of time, that lifted that depression. There is something about, again, this is why I was saying this issue of being a part of a movement, learning the ways in which you can connect to others, and being out as a group. There is something about when there's an event, we go, we know where to go. We walk the streets together, we chant. So there's music and then there's sound, and hearing the person next to you saying, Black Lives Matter, it lifts you up. So it's healing. It's very healing. Sometimes only for a short amount of time. And if it's a true movement and not a moment, there's a hopefulness and optimism that you get.
I've always thought it was really interesting when I got to UCLA to see how world arts and cultures had this stream of activism that it focuses on and that it works on, but it's also performance studies. And then you realize action, acting, performance, there's a catharsis that we get to release socially and individually when we get to be part of something larger than ourselves. And the ceremony, the ritual, the actual movement is an actual corporeal response to the oppression, to the trauma of our ancestors, to feeling subjugated. And I think that what happened during COVID is we were seeing a type of, not to get totally anthropological, but when the social justice movements were taking place, I was talking to people who, I might consider fairly privileged in LA terms, and they were really excited to get out there because they felt like they needed it so badly for themselves, and yet they felt like they were policing themselves to take part of this. Wait a minute, is this for me? It was like, am I supposed to be at a woman's march? That sort of thing. And I was like, yes, it's for you. It's for all of us to get out there and show the numbers. We had to also just get out of our homes. It was a very interesting thing, sociologically speaking. And I think it is exactly what you're talking about, Vic, with the idea of being socially involved, gets us out of our individuality as well.
Yes.
So just, on the other side of things, that, it sounds like, well, let's just sing, let's just dance, let's move together. But what stops us from healing? At the beginning of this evening, so many voices here in this virtual room were not well. And I don't mean to turn this into only an individual thing, but why are we not singing, for example, or dancing, or moving towards one another in ways that we need to? What is stopping us from this work? And glad to know you're feeling better now, Jerry.
I think it's many levels. I think I sort of alluded to it, and everybody did on a certain level. The healing is not an arrival. It's not, I'm sick right now and I'm healed forever. I mean, earlier today I was very down, and then tonight I might be down. So, and that maybe that's just me, but I can be, here and there, and there's still so many issues with COVID, and the race issues go on and on and on in terms of oppression and on so many levels. But I think so. On the one hand, I think we have often a misconceived notion where we don't really fully get that we're on a continuum, that it's like I tell people when I'm talking to people about marriage, for instance, and they'll say, well, it seems like you have such a great marriage. I said, well, yeah, but it's not a utopia. We're smiling, we're loving each other, and then maybe the next minute Joe and I are fussing at each other. But it doesn't mean we don't love each other. There are down times and there are up times. And it's understanding what we have, this idealism, especially in Los Angeles. We think of the movies and it's supposed to be something perfect. We fix our flaws on film and pictures and stuff, and it's not. And I feel like part of it is being okay to be sad. It's a time to grieve, and grieving is not, okay, you're sad, but it's going to be better. No, you're grieving, and grieving is healing. Jesus said the words, blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. And you don't get comfort unless you mourn. So be sad and own it. Be depressed and own that, because that's more of humanity is stronger than. Dave, you're bursting. Come on, brother. I feel you.
Well, I feel like it's to feel the feels. Like I asked myself 3 years ago, I study a lot of new ageisms, right? Because I'm constantly in this debate of what's fake and what's true in terms of health. And one of the things I was constantly seeing is people in the West Coast use the word work. Oh, you got to do the work. Oh, I'm doing the work. I'm really in the work right now. And I was like, well, what the F is the work? Like, what is it? And that's why I accentuated the third thing on my list. You got to feel the feels. The work is to actually do the feeling and not repress it and not think I'm being a crybaby or I shouldn't feel this way. No, you should feel exactly what you're feeling. That's why your emotional is your compass toward joy. You've got to go through the long route sometimes. And so I think that there's a lot of ancestral trauma that haunts us because we're still carrying a lot of the repression of our moms and our aunts and grandmas forward, and dads too. I don't mean to genderize this. And so the result is as a healer, I know a lot of times
if I have someone inside my own practice, I kind of have this almost falling in love with them. But that's just how it feels. What's happening is I'm starting to feel their pain. I'm starting to recognize what it means to walk their shoes, to use a sort of common metaphor. And I think the idea to follow your feelings. I saw inside that healing space in Mexico, people grotesquely bawling like you would not believe they've ever bawled before. And that is the point, actually. They haven't bawled yet. They haven't let it out yet.
Yes.
I'm there for the feels.
I think for the students, it's really difficult. I mean, I think we're talking like adults in a way in which we've been through enough pain that we know the other side. Right now for students, their shoulders are almost bent over with how much they have to carry. I mean, one of the things about teaching during COVID, and I had a class, and I remember, Diane, you said something like this, so I asked my students to have their cameras on. I knew I could almost through this feel the pain. You know, they would be trying to pay attention to class, and so many people in the house, somebody would hit them in the head, just being playful. And they're really trying to study and pay attention. Or there just would be, you know, like the student who was out at a construction site and had his phone, you know, trying to do class. It's almost like they're losing part of their, it's not innocence, but the carefreeness that we said, oh, if you're in college, you're supposed to be, you know, drinking and partying. Our students do not live like that. And that's kind of TV Hollywood to some extent. So, you know, I'm just hoping that what today does is tells them that, you know, there is hope.
Yes.
It is hard. We as your faculty are here. You know, we will ask the university to step up for you, but that I just think it's hard for them in just many ways. I mean, one person even said they don't have the space. Once we bring them and we stack them 3 to a room, it's like, my God, you don't even have a corner to go off in and like look sad and depressed. Then you go in the hallway and I mean, it's like they can't find a corner anymore, kind of thing. So I think it's really hard on them right now.
I couldn't agree more. Sorry, go ahead, Vic.
Oh, okay. I just, you know, there's 2 things I want to follow up on, and I really want to encourage our students to begin to filter us some of your questions, because this really is an opportunity for us together. But the other was that the one point? But the other point that I wanted to emphasize was that I think we're moving into talking about individual pain and healing, but I want to hold on to also the ways in which what we or you are feeling as an individual is also part of systemic issues. And you know, and there's not like one thing that happened to you and now you need to heal. We're looking at inbuilt structures that cause harm, and I want us to be thinking about not only ourselves, which is important, but also the ways in which we are participating in something. And I saw in the chat, someone had left a message saying it's hard to find a safe space, because I had asked, what's stopping us? If the safe space is something that, and I'm going to say you, and I'm not talking to Dee and Vicky and David, but you, all of us create. Otherwise, the control of that space goes to someone else.
That's right.
So let's think about that. And now I really want to make this shift to our students. We really want to hear from you and all of the rest of our guests. Please put your questions or thoughts into the chat or via the Q&A feature.
Yes, we have some questions, I see.
All right. So I'm seeing an early question came from a student who said, we were told that in order It went away. That in order to heal, we need to be prepared. And how do we even know if we're prepared? It's a great question. What does it mean to be prepared? And do you ever know? Maybe we're.
I'm going to jump in and do a little bit of that because I kind of alluded to that. And that is by working. It's like when you're prepared, it means you will begin. You make a commitment. You stick with it. You work through it. So prepared is taking the first step. And, and I'm really going to be a psychologist here and say, there can be many first steps. I don't even consider if you take the first step and don't do something, well, okay, that was that time. Let's do the first step again. Yeah. So I don't think about it as you didn't get to where you needed to be the first time and therefore it was a failure, but it was like different time, different first step. And you will find whether you're going to take 10 steps or not.
That question disappeared because I answered it and I got kind of close, not as eloquent as Dr. Mays, but I essentially said prepared and then doing it when it comes, two different things. Prepared makes it almost seem like you're predicting it. I think healing happens not because you predicted it, but that when it happens, you show up and you're fully present in the flow, which is, I think, the connection to musicality and performance again. So I think it's really well answered. And I think also to connect it to Vic's comment, I feel oftentimes as an educator that it's very easy if I'm teaching something anthropologically, if I'm teaching something about, like, I teach classes about social justice in terms of healing in the medical profession, 100 years ago, that's one thing. But when you're talking about students, when you're talking with students about colonialism, about oppression, and they're living it and they're in a colonial structure, then it's like, Audre Lorde is just in your ear every day. Like, how can I use this system to help what this system is causing? The only way that you can do it is to get fairly meta, and for me, at least as an educator, and create a space where they can talk about that. They can talk about how the teaching itself is challenging, or the institution is making it difficult, or my teaching is problematic. Like, let's have that conversation.
Let me just make a slight shift, a little turn of the dial. The environment, healing the environment. How can we hold that inside of this larger frame of thinking about healing structurally, individually? How can we start to think about our role? Do we feel like we have a role in maintaining this planet? Is that healing?
I think it is. It's very overwhelming. I will say it is overwhelming, especially in a time when we're talking about the need for healing and we see and feel the need for healing on so many levels. And just to be honest, it's certainly not at all an environmentalist, but definitely somebody who's sensitive towards the needs of our environment. It feels so overwhelming. And there are times when I just feel like I'm like, that's how I feel. So that's really just to put that out there.
And Leah says in the chat, she says, we are the planet. So when we're talking about healing ourselves, aren't we also talking about everything around us?
Love that.
And it really is understanding environment, not as just something where it's the weather or smoke, but the environment. It's like, if we take what Leah says, we are the planet, we're a part of that. It is as simple as, the ways in which we clutter or declutter, the ways in which, there's just so many ways to think about what does the environment mean. See, when you do health disparities work, you start to think about environment very differently. It isn't that I have to worry about the environment. The environment is my zip code. The environment is my house, my apartment, my store, in terms of what it does and doesn't sell me. So when we start to talk about the environment and taking care of the environment, it means that the corner store is part of the environment, that you want them to change and you work to change. And you may, that change may be at the ballot box in terms of the way we do taxes. You know, there's just lots of ways to think about like what is really environment. And some people are looking for it to be just carbon neutrality. But as a health disparities researcher, I know that it's when I walk down the street and the sidewalks are cracked because of the trees, that the older people in my neighborhood are afraid to walk. Well, I can get on the phone and start yelling about that to help them walk. That's my environment.
It's horrible to say this, but we're closing in on the whatever it is, half hour. And I want to, I saw this question, how do we know where to start with our healing? And I think that this was spoken to a little bit, just about, starting anywhere. Right, I think that's what was spoken. And also another question came forward. These are such beautiful questions. I'm just going to say them and you all can just respond because I want you to have an opportunity to tie this up. What do you, panelists, do every day that contributes to your healing? And another question is, how can I heal if I still have a lot of resentment? How do I care for somebody who's filled with negativity and yet I want to be able to care for them, but I am harmed by being with them. How do we do these works? And so what I want to ask each of you to do is just take a moment wherever you are to respond to whatever you'd like to, so that we can find some closure for this evening. Closure that's never closed, right? It's just an arbitrary bookmark for continuation.
I'll start. I'm going to take the question where to start with the healing. You start where it hurts. And just like when we have physical issues and maybe it's my neck that's hurting, but that might not necessarily be the source of the physical ailment, but that's just what I feel right now. So I would say wherever the hurt is, start there, sit with it, talk to people, do therapy. I had many therapists and God bless them all. I'm probably still alive because of them. Find those safe places, non-toxic places. Sometimes our circles are toxic and we don't even realize it. They're adding to the hurt. So but that safe place, great, but then get it into another space and just see how different it is when you're in that space with people you don't normally hang with. So all of those things, but I would say just start little. And what you said, Vic, earlier, it's just, you start, I'm sorry, Vicki, I think you said that you start today and then you start again tomorrow and you start again the next day.
I think for me, it's about learning how to have joy in the midst of pain. And what it is that I've learned little things. I can sit in the middle of the most boring lecture and I know how to have a little bit of joy, but pay attention. I've taught myself how to be joyful and I like it. And I'm honest with you, it's something I learned and it is something I like. So it's like when that negative person is there, learn how to be in another space. Oh yeah, I heard you. It's like, can you answer, but go back to your space and just, balance it with a little bit of joy. It's not, what I'm telling you is not easy, but if you can master it, it's wonderful. I can be just as blissful in the most worst place and then get up and go.
excuse me, I sometimes stutter. A variation of that would be one that I do. I spent a lot of years as a practicing Buddhist, and I still teach meditation classes, and Tonglen is a very compassionate way of feeling that if you're feeling resentment, that's okay, because that's how you're feeling. And so it starts with you compassion with yourself, and then you breathe it outward, so that if you can have compassion for yourself, then you can have compassion for your elderly parent who has seen a lot of stuff, and you're their caretaker now. So you're like a parent. And you gotta, what did you want as a kid? Whether you got it or not, what did you want as a kid? Understanding. That's that sense of compassion, and sitting and breathing it and starting internally and then breathing out to everyone is a practice that has been with me since I learned it at age 23. And I think every day I ask myself, how am I feeling? Oh, I'm feeling like a real jerk because I really hate, and that's okay to feel that, because that's what you're feeling. Now that you know you're okay, can you see how they might be okay? And start embodying that. So.
That's beautiful, David.
Tonight. Did I interrupt you?
No, we just weren't hearing you. You were on mute, but I knew you were saying something powerful.
Oh, you know why? That's because Alexa went off in my kitchen.
Uh-oh.
Anyway, a little more information than you needed. But thank you all for this extraordinary evening. And I think that another thing I feel like we keep coming back to is, is the folks from the students in the high school. You are not alone. I think it was Vicky's message, the sense in which we are part of something, we belong to one another, collaboration. I think we have been there many times this evening. So I want to thank you all for being here with us tonight to consider how we heal. And this concludes this evening's program. We hope you'll join us again next week for, well, students, you better. How do we fail? And spoiler alert, failing has got a bad rap. So hold room for failure. Next week, same time, new link. And to learn more about the entire series, we have recordings of every previous week. Or to RSVP, please visit arts.ucla.edu/10questions. Thank you all.